Oggi nel podcast Golden Silence viaggeremo dai canali di Venezia alle strade di New York. Buon viaggio!
Hello everyone and welcome back to the quasi-Venetian canals of the Golden Silent Films podcast. Our cinematic adventure today will take us from those aforementioned canals to the harsh, mean streets of 1915 New York City. And this adventure will be seen through the eyes of a hopeless romantic who gets in a little over his head. This episode will be a gondola ride of information, all focused on 1915 Thomas Ince-produced The Italian. Before we leave those famous canals and immigrate to the main bulk of this episode, let's row on by the usual Golden Silent Films podcast social hangouts. As usual, head on over to the Golden Silence cast on Instagram for up-to-date info on this humble podcast. And for all of you folks on X and or Twitter, just follow at Golden Silence 1 or just search for Golden Silence cast and we should pop up. All of these screen names and sites will be in the episode description in case you are interested in checking us out. We would love to have you in our podcasting world, and at both social spaces, you'll get behind-the-scenes pics and info, upcoming episode reveals, and other fun film-related materials. And as always, cool photos of our official podcasts, Soda and Gizmo. Also, if you're listening to this program on Spotify or Apple Podcast, do leave a review, a rating, or both. Our show has been around for over 4 years now, and we have only 14 reviews on iTunes. We would love to see that number keep growing, and you awesome silent film fans out there can make it happen. All of those ratings and reviews help immensely. Live your best review-leaving life and help our show grow and reach those fellow silent film fans out there. Dropping those reviews gives us more exposure in the world of podcasts and lets us know how we can improve. As always, we appreciate the feedback and always want to bring you the best show possible. And do subscribe to the Golden Silent Films podcast. While our output can be a bit spotty, if you are subscribed, you will never miss an episode, and the moment new content drops, it will float straight to your listening device of choice. We are smack dab in the middle of our travel log of a 4th season and don't want you to miss a second. Now that we have discussed the audio side, let's take a quick moment, as usual, as per the last few episodes, and remind you all out there that our new presence on the video streaming site YouTube. We have started putting past episodes out there for your streaming pleasure. Whether these past gems are new to you, or you want to revisit past movie discussions, you know where to go. And do tell your movie-loving friends about us. The more the merrier, we always say. Now, since we are new to YouTube, please do us a solid and click on over and like and subscribe. We hear it's what all the cool YouTubers ask. We are old and often technically inept. So give us a little positive reinforcement and give our fledgling channel a once-over. To do that, just search for Golden Silent Films Podcast and we will pop up in short order. So thank you all so very much for supporting us on all of these platforms. Now, speaking of multi-platform entertainment, let's discuss how we are going to watch this episode's film. We are a cord-cutting podcast with apps and streaming services as our main television-based connection to the television. Sling is our service of choice, and from one film lover to another, Sling has a lot of great classic film channels. One I just discovered is called Stash, The Classics. It has a ton of classic films and a fair amount of silence if that is your thing like it is ours. I was finishing up a show when I saw The Italian was going to be on soon, so I set my DVR and the rest is podcast history. This film is also available on YouTube. There are a number of versions to be had, but I feel like the one that best gives you the quality you want is the Library of Congress channel. It also has great quality, includes the Ben Model score, which, spoiler alert, is pretty darn good. Once you have finished up with The Italian, stay on the channel and check out one of the many other great films they have. Many of those are silent as well. This is a channel that we have only recently discovered and can't wait to explore more. Now, another way to explore this film on YouTube is to visit the channel run by silent film historian and accompanist Ben Model. Since Ben Model did the music for this film, it's super cool to get it straight from the source. And much like the Library of Congress channel, this site has a literal metric ton of great silent content. And if you're a listener with a few bucks burning a hole in your pocket, you can also pick this up physically via Amazon. It is part of a double feature entitled Perils of the New Land, Films of the Immigrant Experience, 1910 to 1915. This collection contains the Italian, as well as a film called Traffic in Souls and a few Edison shorts. This version has a score performed by the Mont Alto Motion Picture Orchestra led by Rodney Sauer. You know how we feel here. Physical is always king around this home office. So, with all that being said, let's look at an actor and a profession integral to the plot of this film. First things first. George Beben was born in San Francisco, California on December 13, 1873. He grew up on San Francisco's Telegraph Hill and was one of 4 sons of Rocco Beben, a Dalmatian immigrant, and Johanna Dugan from County Cork, Ireland. Like many of the folks we talk about on the show, Beben got his start in show business at an incredibly early age. He was on stage singing with the Reed and Emerson minstrels at the age of 8. His run as a young singer really got the young man a reputation. He would parlay that early success into juvenile roles for the California Theater Stock Company in San Francisco. In his early 20s, Beben took his talents to the stages of Broadway. Musical comedies would prove to be his bread and butter genre, increasing his name recognition amongst the theater-going masses. I mean, when your productions are like 1896's Parrot and Monkey Time and 1898's A Modern Venus, you surely will be poised for a big turn of the century. Those hits just kept coming for George Beben as the 1900s dawned. In fact, his talent wasn't only confined to one theater or setup. He took his roles in theater after theater in shows in New York and across the country. And interestingly, he would show a knack for playing French characters on stage. As you'll learn, George Beben was a world tour in and of himself. The French connection would continue when George M. Cohan wrote the play The American Idea, with Beben in mind to play the lead role of Pierre Sauchet. Beben had previously portrayed French characters in Marie Cahill's production of Ben Bolt and the Lou Fields play About Town in 1906. In 1907, the Chicago Tribune wrote the following about Beben's French characters. The best work of the entire entertainment is accomplished by George Beben as the excitable Frenchman. The actor makes Count Botti a veritable Frenchman, every intonation and inflection, every motion, look, and gesture being exact. He was so good and so identifiable as a Frenchman that I have no official numbers, but Beben had to have been one of the earliest examples of typecasting. No one will ever know what an awful time I had to get away from French characters. I had to live, and for French character parts I could name my own salary. But for anything else, I wasn't worth as much as a chorus man, the actor would say. They say the best way to stop a bad habit is to introduce a new, more beneficial habit in its place. In George Beben's case, it was time to trade in one European character specialty for another, and this new portrayal would be Italian. The world and mindset of the Italian immigrant became the focus and inspiration for George. Beben would leave his persona française behind. He took great pains to fully inhabit the Italian immigrant, studying the language and mannerisms of the Italian immigrants working and living around him. Those various inspirations and interactions would lead him to creating a play that would gain Beben a fair amount of fame. The old nationality switcheroo paid off when Beben wrote a vaudeville sketch where he played an Italian laborer mourning the death of his child. It was called The Sign of the Rose, a play in 4 acts, and would prove to be quite the hit. The New York Times review of the 1911 stage production would explain that this play provides an excellent vehicle for Mr. Beben, who has long been regarded as a clever delineator of Italian roles. Here he portrays very beautifully the simplicity, gentleness, sweetness, and when occasion arises, the native ferocity of the ignorant but well-meaning foreigner. There's a lot to unpack in that blurb, and most of it not very nice, but the reviews spoke very well about his performance in this production. This show was full of drama and incredible performances and twists and turns, and George Beben was there front and center to bring it to the theater-going masses and build towards a highly successful film career. After playing in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the praise for the show only continued. The Milwaukee Sentinel would write, "It is a beautiful piece of character depiction, and throughout, from the first entrance to the last curtain call, Mr. Beben never steps from the picture, never mars the imaginative creativity he has formed. The grip is there, and the sketch is one of the best in the vaudeville field today. The Sign of the Rose was such a big hit that it would go from sketch to full-length play to feature film. Quite the rise up a ladder and setting the course for the next stage of Beben's career and getting his name up there in lights. By the time 1915 rolled around, Beben was fully ensconced in the Italian stagecraft. This would lead perfectly into his role in the Thomas Ince-produced and Reginald Barker directed The Italian, an acting tour de force by George. Now, Beben's second feature was also released in July of 1915. It was called The Alien, and was a film adaptation of his long-running play The Sign of the Rose. Like The Italian before, this was also produced by Thomas Ince and directed by Reginald Barker. In this, Beben portrayed Pietro Messina. Beben would follow those triumphs with Pasquale, a 1916 picture. In an article touting this new film, we really get to see how attached George Beben was to his on-screen Italian personality. The New York Times article from May 22, 1916 reads, "The name of George Beben to one who knows his vaudeville and movies immediately conjures up visions of spaghetti and strings of garlic. One would as soon expect to see Frank Tinney without burnt cork on his face, or Joe Weber without padding, as to see Mr. Beben in anything but an Italian role. So, in Pasquale, a new picture shown yesterday at the Broadway, this actor of types appears as a swarthy son of Italy, running a little grocery store in America." Again, a lot to unpack there, and again, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, not all of that was particularly kind to Italians. But over the course of making this show and reading the materials from this era, it really was eye-opening as to what was considered normal and unoffensive. Well, unoffensive to the writers, but not especially kind to those who would read this stuff in their local newspaper. On more than one occasion, I've had to tone down some more off-putting quotes and articles as I've put this show together. Now, moving on to other more film-related topics, let's talk about Beben's post-Italian cinematic pursuits. In the decade after the release of The Italian, Beben played the leading role in 16 or so Hollywood motion pictures. And looking at the characters he played, you can see he was all in on the Italian on-screen persona. This is a small sampling of the characters he played. There's Guido Bartelli, Giuseppe Franchini, Niccolo Darini, Luigi Riccardo, and Niccolo Rossetti, just to name a few. While his career was incredibly successful, it would also be incredibly short-lived. But we will get into that tragic story after we talk a bit about the tragic story of Beppo Dinetti in the film The Italian. Now, before things get deep and dark, let's talk about one of the most famous cultural hits of Italy. In the film, Beppo Dinetti is a gondolier in the beautiful city of Venice. While not everyone is familiar with the deep cuts of Italian culture and tradition, most will instantly recognize that most famous and romantic of boats. And with this being a Pittsburgh-based podcast, there is an interesting interlude here for us Pittsburghers. For better or worse, in truth and fiction, ours is a city always mentioned in the same breath as Venice. People unfamiliar with Pittsburgh may wonder what the two cities could possibly have in common. Bridges. Bridges are that answer. Pittsburgh is known worldwide for a number of things, but for this episode, we're going to focus on those bridges. We are a city of bridges, and a claim always making the rounds is that we have more bridges than Venice. The score, if you believe the numbers, is Pittsburgh 446 to Venice's over 400. While it pains me greatly to admit any Pittsburgh falsehoods, I have to say this is one of them. If you go by straight numbers, that's just simply not true. Functionally, from the engineering definition for publicly owned bridges, Pittsburgh's not even close, says Todd Wilson, a civil engineer for GAI Consultants of Homestead, in an article for Pittsburgh Magazine. In the same article, we get some deeper insights from a real-life Venetian about this bridge brouhaha. The article, written by Mark Hauser, reads, "The boast that Pittsburgh has more bridges than Venice is one Francesco Zanchini has heard before, a professional Venetian tour guide born and reared in the legendary Italian city. He said it doesn't keep him up at nights. We don't nickname Venice as the city of bridges, probably because there are too many cities in the world with lots of bridges," Zanchini said in an email. Besides, the total usually given for Venice's bridges, the city tourism office says 438, is only for the famous canal-laced islands in the lagoon, not the full city's much larger modern mainland districts where most Venetians live. Well, the truth, it stings a little. It's a load off my shoulders to finally accept that truth, to say it out loud. While the number of bridges is up for conjecture, I can say that the city of Venice, for sure, has way, way more gainfully employed gondoliers than Pittsburgh. And that, folks, I can assure you, is not even close. And I don't even need to see any numbers. The main character and heart of the Italian is Pietro Beppo Donetti. In a tale as old as time, he is a hard-working man in love with a woman whose father doesn't approve of his relationship. It's mostly a money thing in that Beppo doesn't make enough money for the father's liking. Like I said, he is a hard-working and well-meaning guy just trying to make ends meet in one of Italy's oldest aquatic ride-sharing services. Beppo Donetti is a gondolier maneuvering people through countless Venetian canals. Nowadays, it is the tourist who most often rides in those world-famous boats. But it wasn't always that way. In fact, hitching rides in boats wasn't always the most fashionable mode of transportation in Venice. It took a little governmental nudge and anti-horse sentiment to really usher in a boom period of boat driving. In an article on ricksteves.com, Gene Upshaw writes, although the aristocracy preferred horses to boats through the early Middle Ages, beginning in the 14th century when horses were outlawed from the streets of Venice, the noble class embraced gondolas as a respectable form of transportation. Like any fad making the rounds of high society, things would get a little out of control as far as gondola decorating was concerned. And of course, this would bring more governmental nudging. And these gondolas weren't like the gondolas you know today. Gondolas were luxury boats, we read in an article on Italy Magazine's website, coveted by the wealthy who competed amongst themselves to make them ever more beautiful and lavish, equipping them with precious materials and expensive frills. This was true until 1562, when the Senate issued a law restraining squandering and wealth ostentation by mandating that all gondolas be black and bare. Aside from the Pimp My Ride Gondola edition shenanigans, this mode of transportation was big business. My mind was blown when I heard the sheer number of boat-bound transport going on back then. It was estimated that 8,000 to 10,000 gondolas were up and floating during the 17th and 18th centuries. Though I have no pictures, I can only imagine how congested things got in those canals. Today, only a few hundred years removed, there are just over 400 gondolas in service, with most of the riders being tourists. Whilst we're talking gondolas, here's a fun fact. Why don't the gondolas overturn despite the gondolier always standing on one side? It is because the boats are asymmetrical and slightly lean to the right, we read courtesy Italy Magazine. The weight of the gondolier makes them stable. In fact, each gondola is different from the others because it is built according to the body of each gondolier. So we've done quite a bit of talking already, and we haven't even gone to the good movie-related stuff yet. Now, I can tell you we have some more side story contextual tangents coming during the movie breakdown, but let's not waste any more time and get to this episode's feature presentation. Paramount Pictures Corporation, by special arrangement with the New York Motion Picture Corporation, presents George Beben in The Italian. Now, the movie starts off in a very interesting and potentially brain-exploding fashion. George Beben, in a nice smoking robe and big pipe in hand, is in his fancy penthouse-looking apartment reading. He decides to read a novel called The Italian as he reclines on his super comfy-looking sofa, puffing away on that fabulous pipe. Now, I know it wasn't intended, but this is a film with real multiversal implications. Is it George Beben reading the novel? And to take that to its logical conclusion, is Beben imagining himself as Beppo? So that would imply the movie world doesn't exist. The movie is just a dream or fantasy wherein Beben is taking the role of Beppo. That then supposes that we are about to experience a story that never really happened, and that George Beben in his free time is a voracious reader with a powerful imagination. Just a little something to think about as you watch the film. But regardless, Beben begins reading chapter 1. In old Italy, the book reads, from the gray monastery flung like a rampart of the faith against the Italian sky, the bells were ringing the Angelus. A deep, sweet silence had shrouded the vineyards, where the peasants stood with bowed heads. Even the shaggy burros seemed to understand as they gazed with calm, patient eyes over the scene they had grown to love. the sunshine, the mountains. That paragraph does a really good job of setting the scene as we fade out of prime Beben reading and fade into the fictional Italian countryside of the novel. We are now in the book and almost immediately introduced to Trudeau Ansello and his daughter Annette. They are out in the vineyard with the monastery bells ringing nearby. We leave the scenic vineyards to meet Beppo Donetti, admirer of that previously mentioned gorgeous, pretty Annette. He is coolly laying back in his gondola singing and playing guitar. A couple, wanting to experience the magic and romance of Venice, inquire about Beppo's gondola services. They are soon out on the canal for an unforgettable ride. Beppo starts to feel the romance as well, wistfully thinking of his beloved Annette. Unfortunately, Beppo becomes a little too distracted with love and runs the gondola into the base of a bridge, flinging the passengers around and launching Beppo into the drink. Luckily, another seemingly more professional gondolier comes by, rowing by, and picks up the passengers and heads off, leaving Beppo in the throes of public humiliation. It's now fiesta day, and Beppo goes to see his sweetheart Annette. The young lady is really happy to see her amour, even though her father isn't too thrilled. Regardless, the two lovebirds spend some time together in the beautiful countryside. While they are being sweet and loving, we find out there is another suitor waiting in the wings. That would be the merchant Gallia, who also has a thing for Annette. Gallia is quite a dapper fellow, dressed to the nines, looking the Monopoly man sans monocle. He runs into the happy couple and they chit-chat, not fully aware of his intentions. Gallia makes his way to Father Trudeau, where he makes his case for Annette's hand in marriage. And the money he has as a merchant does a lot of the work convincing Annette's father. In his defense, Trudeau does tell Gallia that Annette loves Beppo, the gondolier. Gallia leaves the father with a lot to consider. All while the negotiations were going on, the two lovers playfully ran around through the woods, just having fun and just generally enjoying each other's company. Next, the film tells us youth, heated by the fires of love and ambition, rushes on to meet the future. We see some great visuals of the two walking hand in hand as we learn, while old age, ever shrinking back, stops to warm itself by the dying embers of the past. Beppo and Annette spend the whole day together, only to finally get back to Annette's place super late. So late that her father has been waiting up for them. Now, he's not happy about this, and Beppo pleads his case. In the middle of this, Annette's father tells her Gallia is coming back and asking for her hand in marriage. Again, both Beppo and Annette are none too happy to hear this. Trudeau makes his case for the union. He tells Annette he's rich. He could at least give thee a home of thine own. That sounds like pretty realistic Italian dialogue, if you ask me. All is not lost for our pal Beppo, though. Trudeau makes an offer the gondolier can't refuse. 1 year do I give thee, Beppo Donetti, to win a home for my daughter. Should thou fail, she weds the merchant Gallia. Beppo agrees to that deal and is soon setting sail for the golden land of America with many other fellow Italian immigrants. Now, this mad dash of Italians to leave in pursuit of a better life was no small undertaking and was the byproduct of a country in flux and real general chaos. Especially in those southern regions of Italy, things were especially chaotic. The cultures of Italy were changing, and many citizens were at a crossroads. Thus, the mass exoduses began. In a great article from the Library of Congress, we learn, by the late 19th century, the peninsula of Italy had finally been brought under one flag, but the land and the people were by no means unified. Decades of internal strife had left a legacy of violence, social chaos, and widespread poverty. The peasants in the primarily poor, mostly rural south of Italy and the island of Sicily had little hope of improving their lot. Diseases and natural disasters swept through the new nation, but its fledgling government was in no condition to bring aid to the people. As transatlantic transportation became more affordable, and as word of American prosperity came via returning immigrants and U.S. recruiters, Italians found it increasingly difficult to resist the call of l'America. Now, those two, going back to the film, the two lovebirds embrace, and Annette gives her man a crucifix necklace. Beppo tells Annette, "Never fear, my loved one, for before a year I will send for thee." He joins the throngs boarding the boat for a better life. Unfortunately, though, Beppo, being the what's the word? The absent-minded gondolier he is forgets his suitcase, but is saved when Annette's dad frantically gets it to him. To this point, things have been generally upbeat. Comedic almost. My first time watching this film, I was definitely picking up the romantic comedy vibe. A little bit of slapstick, a little bit of silliness. Just a general fun time. Now, one of the most interesting things about this film is the tone. It really is a tale of two films. As we go on, you'll know exactly when the switch gets flipped. While it is pretty jarring, it makes for an incredible surprise for the average movie viewer. But for now, let's enjoy the wackiness while we have it. So, movie-wise, a week later, the people on board the boat are celebrating the imminent arrival of the boat to the United States. Beppo, though, cannot indulge. He can only think about Annette back home and how much he misses her. He knows she is sad and alone, which makes Beppo feel even sadder and more alone. Now, the boat is passing the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. Beppo asks a ship's crewman about that famous statue. The crew guy tells him that it is, in fact, the Statue of Liberty. They are officially in New York. Now the real work begins. Beppo disembarks and examines his new surroundings. The bustling streets of New York City. A place difficult for even long-time residents of the United States to get around and get acclimated to. I can only imagine how hard it would be in the shoes of an immigrant fresh off the boat. Now, before we get too far ahead, let's take a moment to talk about Lady Liberty and what she meant to the massive numbers of immigrants who saw her as they approached New York City. To the millions and millions, 14 million to be exact, of tired and poor, huddled masses yearning to be free who entered the United States via New York between 1892 and 1924, a remarkable sight awaited them. That sight to behold was the Statue of Liberty on Ellis Island, a beacon of hope and new beginnings in a new land. As the National Park Service website puts it, over time, Liberty emerged as the mother of exiles, a symbol of hope to generations of immigrants. That National Park Service article goes on to say, the opening of the immigrant processing station at Ellis Island in 1892, in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty, facilitated an immigrant association, as did the later popularity of Emma Lazarus's poem, The New Colossus. In 1883, Lazarus donated the poem to an auction raising funds for the construction of the statue's pedestal. This poem vividly depicted the Statue of Liberty as offering refuge to new immigrants from the miseries of Europe. A little later, we are told Beppo sets up a bootblack stand on the Lower East Side. Despite some success, this job and location won't be without its perils. And one of the biggest perils, we are told, is Big Bill Corrigan, the slums boss, who, for campaign purposes, treats his gang to a round of drinks. Beppo's station is set up outside the bar, and when Corrigan leaves, he sees Beppo and an opportunity for votes. Corrigan makes Beppo a proposition to get the Italian vote. In fact, Corrigan gives a bit of cash to the Italian bootblack and says, "Here's a little present for you. Have your wop friends vote for this guy." At first, Beppo is reluctant, but Corrigan, the jerk and offensive fella he is, continues to push. He wants the Italian vote for a fella named John H. Casey for alderman. He's the working man's friend, Corrigan explains. The two shake hands, and the naive Beppo gives his commitment to rock the vote amongst his fellow countrymen. This is the fast track to get Annette, Beppo believes. What, if anything, could possibly go wrong? Later, we teleport back to Italy and Annette, who receives a letter from the donkey-delivered mail service. Well, the donkey didn't deliver the mail. The rider of the donkey did the delivery, but the donkey was there and contributed to the overall action that will provide much-needed happiness to the girl. The letter is dated New York City, April 11, 1913. The letter reads, "Light of my soul, enclosed you will find money for a ticket on the ship Palermo, which sails soon. I will be waiting for you, so hurry to your Beppo." In an episode of the Golden Silent Films podcast back in Season 1, we talked about the Valentino film Cobra. This earlier film, the Italian, employs a cool visual device Cobra would later take advantage of as well. The first time we see the letter, it is written in Italian. The words slowly transform into English for the non-Italian speakers in the audience. It's a small thing, but pops me every time I see it used. What is good news to the goose is bad news for the gander, with the gander in this case being the merchant Gallio. The hoity-toity fellow acts unimpressed and acts like nothing bad has happened. He's a merchant after all, so I assume there'll be more ladies for him. Father and daughter laugh at the humiliated guy. Now, the topic and theme of immigration in films was solid business for movie companies at this time. According to the always amazing Movie Silently website, we read, making films that were sympathetic toward immigrants was good business in the silent era. The cinema was cheap entertainment, and narrators or bilingual children could translate title cards for appreciative immigrant audiences. The New Americans embraced film and kept on embracing it when the novelty factor wore off, but the middle class had not yet accepted it universally. By 1915, movies were pretty well in the mainstream, but immigrant stories were as popular as ever. We now see Annette has arrived in the land of promise. In a bit of fun comedy, we see Beppo running around trying to get flowers to impress his love. This is followed by him trying to figure out where in the boat Annette will be getting off. He keeps choosing incorrectly and not finding her. After some shenanigans, the two are eventually reunited. The two embrace, and you can just feel the love between the two. In fact, they had so much love that night Beppo had the civil marriage performed by his friend, quote-unquote, Alderman Casey. Remember that name? The ceremony goes on, except Beppo has forgotten the ring, as the absent-minded gondolier is often wont to do in this film. What a silly, funny rom-com we are in the middle of. No serious stuff is possibly ever going to happen in this movie. All jokes, right? Now, Beppo improvs a bit and runs out to quickly buy a ring on the fly. After his purchase, he hightails it back to the ceremony. With ring in hand, the event can officially go on, and the marriage is official. The dawn of new life. Beppo and Annette are now new parents with a lovely baby boy, little Tony. Everyone in the neighborhood is so excited. Needless to say, Beppo is crazy in love with his newborn boy. And we again get more funny slapstick stuff as Beppo shows how truly excited he is before we get a soft, quiet moment between the parents and their newborn son. Beppo is especially excited to see that baby Tony sleeps just like him. Beppo exclaims, "Santa Maria! He is asleep just like a me. His hand stuck under his chin." When you read how the characters speak in America, it is a sharp contrast to how the same characters speak in their native Italy. In this film, the characters talk like they're in medieval England. They use thee, thine, and thou early on in the film. Very fancy and highbrow, right? When those same characters, though, get to New York, interestingly enough, they have silly, stereotypical Italian speech patterns. The writers really went out of their way to really get over how Italian Beppo and his ilk really are. I know it's all in service to make Beppo and the other immigrants be the relatable characters that viewers will root for, to make them the underdog in a world that is seemingly always against them. In summation, when in Italy, they use thee, thine, thou, etc. When in USA, keep it to silly Italian cheesy speech conventions. Now, Beppo leads a throng of fellow neighborhood Italians into the same bar from earlier. Beppo and the guys enjoy a drink in honor of the miracle of birth. Months have passed, and midsummer grips the slums in a stifling embrace. Near riots are being caused as people fight to get what little water, food, and supplies are available. They actually stop an ice truck to get anything. In the midst of this crazy heat, Annette and the baby aren't doing so hot. No pun intended. A few days later, little Tony, one of the thousands of heat victims, grows alarmingly worse. A doctor visits to check on the baby. The doc looks at Tony's milk bottle. He then looks at the apartment and sees these really aren't the best of living conditions. The heat and impure food are wearing him out. You must buy him only pasteurized milk, he tells the concerned parents. An article in the Smithsonian magazine written by Daniel Fernandez reads, "In the 1850s, milk sold in New York City was so poor and the contents of bottles so risky that one local journalist demanded to know why the police weren't called on dairymen. In the 1880s, an analysis of milk in New Jersey found the liquefying colonies of bacteria to be so numerous that the researchers simply abandoned the count. Things were pretty bad in the milk industry at this time, and it wasn't strictly a pasteurization issue. From greed and shortcutting for profit's sake to lax health guidelines and impure water, drinking milk was a perilous proposition in the early 1900s America. In the early 20th century, childhood deaths from contaminated milk became a major public health crisis in the United States. Fernandez continues, the milk question grew to such dire proportions that it even attracted the attention of President Theodore Roosevelt. In 1908, his Surgeon General released a 600-page report that attributed most childhood deaths to impure milk and argued that pasteurization was the best way to address this ongoing public health crisis. Now, back in the movie world, the days pass and the heat wave reaches its crest. Annette is heartbroken she can't afford to properly care and feed her child. At the boot-black booth, Beppo is in the same pit of despair. Annette tells Beppo that little Tony must have more pasteurized milk. Right away, Beppo is heartbroken that he can't afford it. He takes what little money he has at the booth and goes to buy some. Now this is where the drama in the movie really kicks in and gets into high gear. On his way to get that very milk needed for his son's survival, Beppo is robbed and violently attacked. What little he had is gone. Beppo has nothing and is wounded from the attack. He slowly marches home, sad that he has failed his son. But wait, he sees his assailants and we get a big zoom in on Beppo as the rage and anger consume him. He charges at them. He explains himself, saying, I must get to de milk or my baby is die. They could care less if his baby is die. So Beppo grabs a huge wrench and starts beating them, only to have a cop come and arrest him. The pain shown by George Beben in Beppo is incredibly real, gut-wrenching, heart-throbbing. He really does everything to put his feelings out on the screen, and you feel it every second of his little flare-up. As the cop is leading Beppo away, the immigrant sees Corrigan getting into a car nearby. Knowing Corrigan to be the boss of the slums, whose word is law, Beppo appeals to him for mercy. When he explains his plight to the boss, Beppo is pushed away and the car drives off, with Beppo hanging on for dear life. He eventually falls off, with Corrigan totally apathetic. The cop regains control of Beppo and throws him in jail. All the while, Corrigan enjoys a nice afternoon with his wife and child. Now, movie silently gives us some context into this milk issue we talked about a little bit earlier. It seems that the article reads, it seems that the issue was not so much that the milk was pasteurized as the manner in which it had to be purchased. Before the doctor's visit, the family's milk was stored in a pail and was likely procured as needed from some fellow with a cow. Pasteurized milk would have to be delivered, and delivery required payment in advance. While the per-bottle price was lower, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the consumer had to pay out a larger sum at once. Say $1 for 12 bottles as opposed to 10 cents per bottle. That wouldn't have been a problem, but Beppo was robbed, and with the loss of his income, Annette could not hope to pay the fee. In another heartbreaking scene, Beppo from behind bars tries to dictate a letter to a nearby officer. Beppo thinks things are going to turn around, but sadly, it's only going to get worse. Once that cop was out of sight, he laughs and rips up the letter to Annette. This letter ain't going to be delivered, folks. Sorry to say. So for a whole week, Annette had no idea where Beppo was or if he was okay. In that week, unfortunately, baby Tony dies, and we see the baby-sized coffin carried out to the hearse, where Annette gets in. Beppo is still in jail, unaware of the tragedy that has befallen him and his son and his wife. It really is a heartbreaking set of circumstances that you really can imagine an immigrant at the time suffering. And George Beben, to his credit, really throughout the movie, you feel every emotion from his acting. When his sentence is eventually expired, Beppo is a free man, but free to return to what? He leaves jail with no clue of the tragedy and sadness that awaits him. Jail has given the poor man some rough edges that will only get rougher when he returns home. It is here that he learns the devastating news. Annette cries out to Beppo. The two embrace in shared heartbreak. She tells Beppo that their little Antonio is gone. He digs through the now empty crib as the realization hits. Annette consoles her husband as we fade out. It's a month later. Beppo is back at work shining shoes. While we see Beppo at work, let's take one last tangential slide into the Italian immigrant experience. New York's Ellis Island in 1892 was the port of entry for millions of Italian immigrants. Over the course of 40 years, Italians were the largest group of immigrants to pass through Ellis Island. And those numbers, they really shot up incredibly. From 300,000 in the 1880s to 2 million in the 1890s and early 1900s. That number climbed to 4 million by 1920, with Italians accounting for over 10% of the foreign-born population. Those are some pretty monster numbers, and with such a massive influx of humanity, like Beppo, folks were going to need employment to get those American dreams up and running. According to the Library of Congress, in San Francisco, the new arrivals found their way to the docks for work as fishermen and stevedores. In Appalachia and the Mountain West, they went into the pits and mines, digging for coal and ore. Stonemasons who had learned their trade on the rocks and crags of southern Italy worked in the quarries of New England and Indiana. Meanwhile, Italians labored on farms and ranches in every corner of the country, from the cranberry bogs of the Northeast to the strawberry beds of Louisiana to the bean fields of California. Now, for a tangent inside a tangent, reading about Italian immigrants with sick stonemason skills brought Cleveland's Little Italy to my mind. This is a really cool neighborhood located literally outside of Cleveland's Lakeview Cemetery. This neighborhood was established in the late 19th century by immigrants largely out of Italy's Abruzzi region. Giuseppe Carabelli, writes Michael Sharaba for clevelandhistorical.org, writes Giuseppe Carabelli, an Italian artisan, came to Cleveland via New York to open a sculpting and stonemasonry business. Carabelli's early employees developed reputations as expert stonemasons due to their contributions to monumental works at nearby Lakeview Cemetery. The residential space to the south of the cemetery became occupied with numerous Italian families near the turn of the century. I can't recommend this Little Italy enough. If you're looking for great Italian food, I can vouch for the great meal options after a day of exploring the gorgeous cemetery next door. Definitely a stop worth making if you are in the neighborhood. So, returning to the movie and Beppo's shining shoes. He's plugging away when he sees a newspaper a customer is reading. The headline says, "Corrigan's child near death. Wealthy politician expects crisis today. Dr. Briggs, the world-famous specialist, is today directing the fight to save the child of William H. Corrigan, the well-known political boss. To preserve extreme quiet, the streets in the immediate vicinity of the home are roped off." We also learned that the child had contracted a brain fever. A dark, impulsive, vengeful idea pops into Beppo's head as we switch our focus to Corrigan's mansion as he consoles his child. The film tells us the doctor believes another hour of absolute quiet and he can pull her through. The slightest disturbance, however, will be fatal. Disguised as a peddler, Beppo seeks his revenge in the home of Corrigan. This subterfuge gains Beppo access to the home where he sets his wicked plan in motion. He makes his way to the now empty, save for the child, kids' room. He sneaks in and makes his way into that sick child's room. He slowly moves towards the girl's crib, lamp in hand, ready to exact his terrible revenge. He raises the lamp only to see the sick, sleeping girl put her hand under her chin. He stops when he sees this is the same gesture little Tony made when he slept. This appears to clear the dark fog of vengeance from Beppo as he remembers fondly what little time he had with his son. He can't do that to someone else's child, no matter how vile their father is. Having listened to his conscience, he skulks out the window and leaves. We see Beppo at his son's grave where the film tells us he is, at the eternal bedside of his baby, where hate, revenge, and bitterness melt to nothing in the crucible of sorrow. Part of what makes the Italian so haunting is the ending, writes Movies Silently website. After his son dies while he's in jail, Beppo is tempted to kill Corrigan's daughter as revenge, but is unable to harm the child when he sees her sleeping with her hand under her chin just like little Tony. Instead, he goes to Tony's grave and weeps. There is no resolution, no do-gooder armed with pasteurized milk, no idealistic lawyer ready to save the day. Corrigan will likely keep being a selfish local boss until retirement or assassination, and nothing will bring little Tony back, we read. We cut back to George Beben finishing the book and reading the last page, which says, "With the precious flowers in his worn, grimy hands, Beppo again knelt by the grave of his baby son. Pretty flowers for you, my bambino, my—" His voice broke abruptly into a sob, a deep, racking sob of a man crushed beyond his strength to endure as he threw himself across his baby's grave. The movie ends with the curtains closing on Beben contemplating what he has just read. And that, folks, is the end of The Italian. So with the film at a conclusion, I can say I really loved this movie. It was an incredibly emotional experience that hit me right in the gut every time I watched it. Sure, the first half is fun and lighthearted and really almost throwaway fare, but things really do get kicked up a notch once Beppo gets married. I had no idea that switcheroo was coming, and I absolutely loved it. Like I just mentioned, the film could really have been easily forgettable, but it was the performers who really stepped up and made this an unforgettable movie experience. The movie really does hinge on the prowess of everyone involved in making their time on screen meaningful. And that is where we start to talk about George Beben as Beppo Donati. He absolutely nailed the role and really imbued the character with so much emotion that I was on board with him from the get-go. He nailed the comedic aspects and the super emotional parts with great flair, and that takes a lot of skill from an actor to be able to go from two extremes and still make it all believable, make it all relatable, and make it really jump out to the viewer. He really was Beppo Donati. Now, I wasn't the only one praising Beben's work here. Turning back to the Movies Silently website, we read, "Beben can be predominantly credited for the film's success on other fronts. There are few things in this world that age worse than fine acting. One generation's genius is another's ham, and silent-era acting is even dismissed by people who claim to admire the era. In Beben's case, his performance has aged remarkably well, and while 1915 was a strong year for movies, I have to say that Beben's acting in The Italian makes him a contender for Best Actor." But it was Beben's co-star who also caught the eyes of Movies Silently. In their review, they write, "Beben's performance was praised in the silent era and is now praised by modern critics. But Clara Williams also deserves kudos as Annette. The role is thin compared to Beppo, but Williams, a William S. Hart regular, is equally sympathetic. She particularly shines in her brief scene of mourning, being broken and melancholy. The film was directed by her future husband, Reginald Barker, who certainly photographed his wife in a flattering manner." A short review on the Short Guide to Movies adds, "Director Reginald Barker enriches the film with the excellent poetry of the Irish shots, a declared sense of social denunciation, namely, the poor living conditions of immigrants in New York at the beginning of the 20th century, and in his denouement of deep humanist praise. The face of George Beben, the protagonist of a story about poverty, anguish, and death, is a major symbol of how the American dream was never just around the corner." And before we leave this segment, let's talk a bit about the music and what we thought of it. The film score I want to talk about here is the one composed by noted silent film composer Ben Modell. He did some really great work on this picture, and one thing I can always appreciate about a Ben Modell score is how it feels so time-specific. I mean, if I was at the theater watching The Italian in 1915, I would feel that this really fits right in, and it really does a great job of providing the musical cues that really hammer home the visuals and the emotion of what's on screen. Now, this version of The Italian was preserved by the Library of Congress and restored by the Library of Congress's Motion Picture Conservation Center. According to the Library of Congress, though, the film was originally and rather unfortunately entitled The Dago, but George Beben was reportedly not a fan of that title, so it was changed. Sources disagree on the film's original length, but appears to be complete in 6 reels. To cement the legacy of The Italian, it was selected for the National Film Registry in 1991. It was one of a pretty star-studded group that included Lawrence of Arabia, City Lights, Chinatown, Sherlock Jr., and King Kong, just to name a few. Now, as we lay this episode to rest, it is time to find out where your favorite silent stars are laid to rest. This is the segment where we join our favorite cinematic stars on the other side of the cemetery gates. The history, the art, the celebrity spectacle converge in Where Are They Now? your guide to paying your respects to the amazing actors that have entertained us so very much. Unfortunately, this Where Are They Now provides quite a tragic and early end to actor George Beben. Before we get to the sad stuff, let's catch up with the actor's personal life, since we focused on his career earlier. Now, Beben was married to Edith McBride, though I had a little bit of trouble finding the actual date of the marriage. McBride was a stage actress who often appeared in stage productions with Beben. I would assume this era, the early 1900s, is when they courted and eventually married. Some of those productions she shared the stage with Beben were Moonshine in 1905 through 1906, About Town in 1906, and The American Idea in 1908, just to name a few. Not only were they partners in life, but they were also shared the silver screen together in 1915's The Alien. Now, that movie would be a true family event, also starring their son, George Beben Jr., who was born in 1914. He would soon follow in his father's footsteps, becoming a child actor who appeared in 3 films with his father. That earliest role came with his parents in The Alien. Now, that will conclude our uplifting family portion of this episode. From here on, it becomes a fairly sad story. Edith McBride, George's wife, would pass away on December 10th, 1926, when their boy was a mere 12 years old. 2 years later, fate would come looking for George Sr. Everything started off innocently enough, a quick vacation to a dude ranch for some rest and relaxation and horse riding. Quick interjection, I recently went to a horse stable for the first time in a long, long time. I'm already a nervous and anxious person, and being around horses did not quell those feelings. I was super paranoid about being kicked, and how the Beben story concludes has done zero to calm my jangled nerves for future horse encounters. Now that things are adequately ominous, let's continue. According to the October 6, 1928 New York Times, we read, "The actor had gone to the June Lodge Dude Ranch near Big Pine, California, for a short vacation. On Saturday afternoon, he went riding, and when he returned to the ranch, he dismounted to open a gate. As he attempted to remount, the horse became unruly and kicked Mr. Beben in the right leg and threw him to the ground." The paper continues, "A fracture was set by doctors summoned to the ranch, after which Mr. Beben was brought to Los Angeles. According to his physician, Dr. S.M. Alter, he had been treating the actor for some time for uremia, and that condition was greatly aggravated. Beben was moved to a hospital, although he never regained consciousness. In addition to being kicked, the paper reports that he was also dragged and pawed by the horse. While this drama was ensuing, George Jr. was at school in New York, where he was staying with his dad's sister." The New York Times adds, "Physicians said the presence of uremic poisoning in his system, from which he suffered for some time, aggravated his condition and hastened death. With him when he died were his brother, Louis Beben of San Francisco, and his son, George. George Beben passed away on October 5th, 1928, at the age of 54. His physical remains are at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. The actor was cremated, and his ashes are interred at the Great Mausoleum Coleus Mezzanine Columbarium, niche 2069. With our whirlwind journey from Venice to New York, back to Venice, and finally back to New York behind us, let's start wrapping up the program and relax a bit from that wild and emotionally heavy finale of The Italian. Did you enjoy our first Italian-themed episode? What Italian silence should we dive into next? Have you been to Italy, and more specifically Venice? If you have, let us know how amazing that trip must have been. Let us all know that and more at the various social media spots of the Golden Silent Films podcast. On that note, if you don't remember, we are on Instagram and Twitter. And lest you forget, we are on YouTube now as well. Let us know what you thought of our current World Tour 24 that's going on as we speak. What silent and silent-related movies, past or present, home or abroad, do you want us to look at next? Our world of silent movie knowledge and experience is constantly growing, and we need your input for our future episodes here and beyond. You can always find us at Golden Silence Cast on Instagram and at Golden Silence 1 on Twitter. And again, if you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or frankly any other podcast outlet that allows it, subscribe, rate, review, follow. It does a lot for our visibility, and we love hearing your thoughts and ideas. We really, really appreciate all of your incredible support and seeing how much you folks are listening. only makes us want to make bigger, better, and more epic episodes, with extra added emphasis on more, as we are on pace to blow by our record number of episodes in a season. So, with all of that being said, thank you to all of you fine listeners for all of your fine listening. And as always, don't forget, the silents are golden, and the talkies, they're just a fad. We'll leave you with one last thought from the Incredible Movies Silently website that we feel perfectly sums this film up. The article reads, "Between the skillful performances of Beben and Williams, the meaty political context, and the high production values, The Italian is one of those films that stays with you for years and always offers more to discuss with each viewing. It's one of the most acclaimed social dramas of the silent era for a reason, and I hope you will give it a watch. And I cannot agree with that sentiment more."